I warn you that in this video, I will deal with very macabre topics. This means heavy subjects, and I'm going to relate quite unpleasant things, so if you stay here, you know what to expect. You've probably never heard the term hurtcore. I'm not saying hardcore at all, I'm saying hurt, as in, to harm. This term refers to extremely graphic pornography based on inflicting pain, especially on vulnerable people, including children and even babies. It's important that you know this term because this story revolves around this disgusting practice. Now let's meet the main protagonist of the story, Matthew Falder, who was born 31 years ago in Manchester, England. He comes from a fairly wealthy, normal family, went to a good school, and from an early age showed great intelligence and got the best grades. So much so that he could enroll at Cambridge, which is one of the best universities in the world. Surely you've heard several times that Cambridge and Oxford are the two best in the UK. There he earned his doctorate with outstanding grades in geophysics. His friends describe him as a very fun, friendly, extroverted person, a friend to his friends, and he even had a partner. So we have the profile of a typical friendly nerd. Not at all what comes to mind when we think of a psychopath or sociopath, since they usually come from dysfunctional families, were abused as children, or experienced severe bullying at school. Usually people who do evil are people who have received evil since they were young, so they come out a little deviant, and this is when psychopathy starts to emerge. But in this case, we have an absolutely normal guy, a postgraduate researcher by day and sexual predator by night. Before telling you exactly what this criminal did, let me tell you that he was doing what I'm going to tell you for almost 10 years. Almost 10 years in which he went unpunished, in which the police couldn't catch him. This is many years for any criminal, regardless of type, which already denotes great intelligence and extensive knowledge of internet encryption because his crimes were born and lived online. When he was about 19, Matthew started entering the deep web, and more specifically, he started looking for websites that dealt with extreme content and pedophilia. When I talk about extreme, I'm referring to hurtcore, the worst of human depravity. It's so extreme that even known pedophiles flee from it. It is undoubtedly the highest degree of depravity a human being can reach in what we'll call the sexual territory. Though for me, this isn't even about relations anymore. But let's say in the territory of paraphilias, it's the lowest. It's the dungeon of the worst. He started looking for material and made acquaintances who had the same tastes as him, but he quickly got bored. He wanted to be a protagonist, wanted to be an active rather than passive element in that environment, especially on the hurt2.core page, which was the authentic meeting point where the world's sickest people gathered to share videos of assaulting babies. You might have heard of Daisy's destruction, which is an urban legend that some people say isn't true or doesn't exist. It's the video where supposedly a woman abuses a baby named Daisy in every way possible. Well, that video is completely real, and in fact, the person who made it is in prison. Peter Scully was the mentally ill criminal who is in prison and who recorded that video. I could also explain the story of the founder of that hurt2.core website, Matthew David Graham, known in that environment as Lux, who is also in prison. But today I'm going to focus on Matthew Falder. As I say, Matthew got tired of just watching. He had a thirst for prominence, wanted to be recognized, wanted to be venerated, wanted to post something of his own that would be well received by scum like him. And he devised a master plan that lasted almost 10 years. On the conventional internet, the internet we all use, he looked for vulnerable people, people with problems. He searched and searched, and when he found a victim, normally or almost always did the same thing. He posed as a female artist called Liz. He was very friendly and had a great capacity for manipulation, false empathy, managed to get to the root of the problem of the person he was talking to, and almost always achieved his objectives. And what did he want? Well, he wanted them to send him suggestive photos first, either because he needed them for some artistic project, or because in exchange he would get them something they wanted. For example, there was a girl in a boarding school who wanted a dog, so using Liz's profile, he assured her he would buy her a beautiful puppy if she sent him a topless photo. And that's how he started with almost everyone. Once he had the first material, Matthew changed completely, becoming someone aggressive and very demanding. And when his demands weren't met, which was in 100% of cases because that's precisely what he was looking for, the rebellion of that weak person he knew he could control. What did he do? He threatened to publish those photos on the internet, or show those photos to their families, friends, employers, or schoolmates. For example, that girl who wanted the dog told him she was receiving a lot of bullying at the orphanage, so he threatened to send those photos to all her friends. And what did he ask for in exchange? First, sexual photos, in increasingly extreme positions. And note that his victims were usually very young. It's known that the youngest was only 13 years old. Imagine putting a 13-year-old girl in such a situation where she has been deceived, where she has shown something that for such a young girl is very intense, and Matthew is manipulating to get more. I'll tell you some of the things that Matthew literally asked them to do, and there are photos and videos of all this, all real of course, all kinds of sex-related things, videos, photos. You can imagine the type. But he also asked them for videos of licking their own feces, drinking their urine, forced them to go to public toilets, the toilet of a McDonald's, a metro station, and record themselves while licking the inside of the toilet, eating dog food, taking photos with signs praising Hitler or with super racist messages, and most seriously, forcing them to assault other people, especially their own daughters. One of those human beings who were abused because of Matthew was a baby. And what did he do with all this material? He shared it on the deep web, especially in the forum I mentioned, hurtcore. Well, another thing he also did was go to public services or university facilities and place cameras that he would later use to blackmail more people. But all this online, he never physically met or touched any of the people, especially very young girls, with whom he maintained this power relationship. Because yes, the key here for me is power. I very much doubt that this degenerate did this just for relations, just for sexual attraction. He didn't get turned on by this. He did it for power, for sadism, for cruelty, for feeling absolutely superior to these weak people, these people who have problems. He is undoubtedly one of the most purely evil profiles I've seen in my life. Notice that several of the people he had trapped told him clearly that they couldn't take it anymore, that they were going to kill themselves if this continued, that they were at their limit, that they weren't going to do what he was asking them to do. His response, "I don't care at all if you live or die. Do what you want. I have these images, and I'm going to leak them." It's such a high point of psychopathy that even telling this horrifies me. And note this is a totally recent story, in 2017. We're not talking about something that happened in the 19th century. No, not at all. It's something that happened very few years ago. It's believed that Matthew tortured between 60 and 120 people. You might ask about the police. The police had some scattered complaints, but were unable to put the puzzle together because this guy was as genius as he was evil. He encrypted absolutely everything he did, and since he never wanted to meet or have contact that wasn't online with any of the people, there was no way to connect the dots. And how is all this known? Because even the most intelligent psychopaths always make one mistake, and it's always the same. Arrogance. What happened was that he felt so superior to the police that he started to get a bit careless. He contacted a girl again, posing as the artist Liz, and asked her for erotic photographs to work with, willing to pay £1,200. The girl was horrified and said no. Matthew's response was to send her photos and videos of explicit pedophilia. At that moment, the girl collapsed and told him that this was a cover-up, that his name wasn't Liz, that he was a guy, and that she was going to report him. And indeed, he was reported. As I say, arrogance made him careless, and in some of those pedophilic images he sent, Devil666 appeared, which was one of his most used usernames, one of his more than 70 aliases he had used. The other two he used most were In the Garden and Evil Mind. We're in May 2015, and the English police, along with Interpol, issued a search and arrest warrant for the person calling themselves Devil666. They started connecting the dots with other complaints that had been made with similar nicknames, and finally managed to trace the signal to an apartment. On June 21st, English police entered the apartment and found Matthew. In the apartment, they found absolutely everything. You can imagine what kind of graphic material was in there. Thousands of photos, videos, some of extreme pedophilic content, and of course, Matthew was sent to jail immediately. The trial was quick. and he was sentenced to 32 years in prison, which seems too little to me. I think people like this should be in prison for life without the possibility of release, if not something even worse. My only consolation is that I know perfectly well how other prisoners treat criminals like Matthew. As a final note, to show you to what extent his mind was twisted, they found several conversations in his apartment that he had with other deep web users. And in some conversations, they found phrases like, "One of my dreams would be to break all the bones of a baby, being able to do it one by one." Or, "How I would like to use a small child as a target." As you can see, there are human beings for whom the definition of evil falls short.